Michigan freshman Jett Howard might just be the type of player every NBA team is looking for. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. At 6'8", 215 pounds, Howard has prototypical size for a wing in the league. He doesn't have the longest arms, but he has a wide frame and plenty of pedigree. Not only is he coached by his dad, a former NBA All-Star and champion, but I also like Michigan's recent track record in the draft. Going back a few years, we see prospects like Jordan Poole, Karis LeVert, Franz Wagner, Duncan Robinson, or Isaiah Livers. And in my eyes, Howard might be as dangerous of a shooter as those last two guys. His versatility from deep has been on display all season long, as we're seeing here. Quite simply, you never want to leave Howard open. Jett is shooting about 39% from 3 on more than 7 triples a game. This is really high volume and in all different types of contexts. They're not the same type of player at all, but Howard's usage from deep reminds me a little bit of Keegan Murray last year. We saw Iowa use him in all types of ways, and Murray shot 40% from 3 and is shooting even better now in the NBA. So like I said, Howard's diversity from the perimeter is really intriguing. The UMich freshman will shoot threes in transition, coming off pin downs, out of handoffs, and he can even pull up himself from time to time. Jett has such an easy shot with pure touch and clean mechanics. I have really little concerns about where it stands as he likely heads into the league after this season. Maybe the one mechanical thing is that his lower body can move around a bit, but I'm not a stickler on that given the shot diversity, volume, and his numbers. I do want to see his 79% from the free throw line go up, but a bit more on that later. As we just saw, there's a clear plug-and-play role for Howard in the NBA. Probably right off the bat. He profiles as a knockdown shooter at the next level, and that's great, but what really makes Howard a possible lottery pick are his flashes of more. Jett isn't purely a spot-up shooter. He can also create his own offense from time to time. Now, these are still just glimpses, but I've seen enough during his freshman season at Michigan to buy in long term. I like when the Wolverines give Howard these reps. He likes shooting from the corner like we can see here, but what I'm truly focusing on are these reps out of the pick and roll and off the dribble. Making these types of shots is an incredibly valuable skill in the NBA, and if Howard can get these threes to go in consistently, watch out. As of now though, it is true that the majority of Howard's makes from deep are assisted, about 3/4 of them. But I'm fine with him taking these shots, even if he misses. You do want Jett to add this type of three to his arsenal long term, because then his shooting gravity becomes even greater, and he grows as an overall threat on the floor. Down the line, I'm confident that Howard will be knocking these down. You might be thinking that I'm a little too optimistic about this, but it has to do with what Howard has shown from 2. For instance, I love this here. Howard acts like he's about to set a pin down, lifts up to the wing, and ends up getting the and one. Anytime Jett comes out to the perimeter, defenses are watching him really closely, so I'm also a big fan of this floater that he has. Jett can make this shot in stride from in between, and this is actually a very useful tool because he still has to grow at the basket. More on that later, but this runner can definitely help him overcome some limitations. Besides that, I've also liked when Howard has combined his handle and frame to get a bucket. This possession handling the ball, splitting the pick and roll, and then finishing at the rack is pretty cool. At 215, Howard is stocky for a freshman, and he's got a little shake and bait to his dribble. Howard is unlikely to blow by you, but he can keep you on your toes with his crossovers or drag backs. Then he has the balance and strong base to rise into his pull-up. This season so far, Jett is shooting 47% on 2-point jumpers, while creating most of those looks for himself. We see that right here, for example. These flashes are really nice, don't get me wrong, but in truth, there's still a long way to go for Howard. He doesn't get to the rim that much, just 35 times this season so far, and he's not really inspiring from there either. Jett is shooting 60% at the basket, which is definitely improvable. And like I mentioned earlier, he's not getting to the free throw line that much, which shouldn't be the case for someone of his build. My biggest takeaway after watching Howard's tape is that he's just not that explosive of an athlete, and that comes with limitations. Usually, I look at explosiveness in two ways: a player's first step, and then their burst in power at the rim. Howard's footwork into his jumper is pretty good, but I don't know that I can say the same when he's driving. Jett doesn't really get past anyone, and he can sort of get caught up in his short, choppy steps at times. Then he's not great creating separation or angles at the basket unless the straight line already is there for him to take it. Howard has solid size, but he's a little slow and heavy on his feet, so he can struggle getting a step on his man, and then when he does get to the rim and is trying to score, he still has to be more sturdy. However, I'm just not that worried. Sure, it would be great if Jett was a ferocious finisher shooting 75% at the basket, but I kind of think you have to draft him with the understanding that he's not that type of player. Obviously you want him to improve, but really I think it's about all the other things that he brings to the table. We saw the threes and the flashes of pull-up shooting, but I also want to focus on his playmaking. Howard's numbers don't jump off the page, but this is also where I think the eye test is just as important. This season, we've seen Michigan give Jett some reps in the pick and roll, and I think Howard has handled them pretty impressively. His main dynamic this season at UMich has been with Hunter Dickinson, but I think that all of these reads also translate to NBA centers. Howard is an underrated, funky passer, and he has some zip and creativity to his deliveries. Like we saw, he's a pull-up threat whenever he's coming off screens, so bigs are going to guard him on the back foot. From there, Jett is capable of playing at more than one speed. He can freeze the big, and then find his teammates with pocket passes in stride. Howard has 45 assists to 21 turnovers, which is really encouraging. To some extent, he's already a dribble pass shoot wing, and every NBA team wants at least one of those. Clearly there's improvement areas, but the long-term outlook on Jett has to be considered positive. At the same time, I think fit in the NBA is going to be really important. Because Howard is such a good shooter, there are definitely scenarios out there where he gets boxed into one specific role. Now, could he be simply a spot-up shooter? I'm sure he could be, and maybe he'd shoot 40% from 3 and no one would complain. But I think there's way more to Jett's game than that. We've seen his strengths and improvement areas at the rim and with his pull-up, which are both going to be important when attacking closeouts. Another option there, these passes that we're seeing now. Seeing as how Jett is already comfortable getting a paint touch and then generating threes, this is what I want to keep seeing more of. Sure, it's simple, but simple is not bad. Simple is effective. Down the other end of the floor, I'm more unsure of Howard's fit. I think there's lots of roads for him on offense, although ideally he becomes a dribble pass shoot 6'8" wing, but on defense, being a wing means having to be on the perimeter guarding in space a lot, and I'm not sure Howard can do that yet. I touched on this when we were looking at how Jett can improve as a finisher at the basket, but the fact of the matter is that certain things just work against him. He's heavy-footed and just not that flexible, so it's almost inevitable that he will get scored on. Sure, that's simplifying it, but it's just what ends up happening a lot of the time. Jett competes on D, at least one-on-one, so it's not like he's getting cooked, but for instance, he can't do anything here against Caleb Love. Or here, he's against Severe Wheeler on the switch, the foot speed isn't there, so he fouls. At the same time, I do think Howard can become at least a passable positional defender, even if I'm not sure that he'll ever be a plus on this side of the ball. Again, it sounds simple, but he's 6'8", so when you're that size, you just take up a certain amount of space. And seeing as how Howard does make an effort on defense, then there are times where he does make plays. If he's up against someone with an average first step, Howard is able to keep up laterally and maybe get a block. We see that here, or again, here. He won't look that graceful doing it, but a stop is a stop. Still, this will happen far less against NBA level athletes who will also be his size. so Jett's D is definitely going to be worth tracking once he's in the league. Off the ball, I also have a lot of questions. It's not exactly that Howard lacks discipline, but you can tell that he's still really learning how to play defense. For instance, he'll make reads but a couple of seconds late. This happens when he fights over screens, which has been an improvement point for him all season long. Other times, it's simply recognition. This play against Kentucky stands out. It's not awful defense, but Howard wrongfully anticipates and leaves his feet. Then his closeout is hasty, and he gives up the bucket at the rim to Jacob Toppin. If Howard was a better athlete at his size, he would have more margin for error. But right now, he really has to make sure that he's making the right rotations, with the right technique, at the right time. Defense isn't instinctual to Jett yet, but I want to see some more of these plays. Earlier this season against UNC, I was impressed with some of Jett's moments. In these clips, he's active and engaged. He knows when to help in the pick and roll, and is able to come up with a few stops. This one where he's reading the screen action from the weak side, sinks and gets the steal is one of my personal favorites and something that NBA teams will want from him a lot more. So when June comes around, I think Jett Howard has every chance to be a lottery pick, and I definitely do not see him falling any further than top 20. Now, this is for a few reasons, but it all boils down to the fact that you're looking at a 6'8" guy who's going to be 19 on draft night, can dribble, pass, can shoot definitely to a high percentage. I think he's going to be one of those guys who makes 38, 39, 40% from deep once he's in the NBA, can make some reads out of the pick and roll. I do think his defense is the biggest question mark. You're not entirely sure what position he defends. You're not entirely sure how he keeps up with the foot speed of the NBA. But from an offensive standpoint, I'm all in on Jett Howard. I think he'll figure it out on defense to the point where he'll at least be competitive. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Jett Howard. And as always, if you enjoy the channel, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.